Today's topic is something that we've been dealing with for quite a while in this space, and lately it seems that mental health and psych injuries are becoming more prolific. So what I thought I'd do is go through a few stats just to set the stage for the rest of the speakers so they don't have to go through them. And doing this did take me back to my time as a psych student, where I was actually channeling a little bit of Tony Love's counselling and a little bit of Johnny Reese's stats, which is the reason I don't do psychology anymore. No. So probably the first thing to look at is if we take workers' compensation out of the picture and we just look at mental health on a national basis, it is now the third highest burden of disease group in Australia. So when we talk about burden of disease, we talk about cost, we talk about morbidity and mortality, and a few other factors that go into it. So if we look at that, it's outpaced musculoskeletal injuries and only beaten now by cancer and cardiovascular. So we're seeing a huge rise in that space. What we also know from the data Australia-wide is that at any one point in time, 20% of the population will be suffering from a mental health issue. Okay, so if you take that into your workforce, that means at any one point in time throughout the year, up to 20% of your workforce is probably struggling with something that is not necessarily work-related, but it will impact on their ability to work and their ability to perform. If we then have a look at what the top actual disorders are, and it'll be no surprise, depression, anxiety. When we look out there in the normal population, these are the things that our workers are dealing with. And if we look at someone who is depressed or anxious, we can obviously say, well, maybe they're not going to perform as well in the workplace. And Andrew will talk in a bit about what is it employers have to do and what is it they can do to support workers and protect themselves at the same time. Then if we start to break this into the workers' compensation space, what we know, if we look at the last 5 years, five-year period of this data from Safe Work, 6% of all claims for workers' compensation are psychological injury. The data for the actual 16-17 year was 6.9% on itself. But if we take that a step further, they might only be 6% of claims, but they're 3% longer in duration and 2.5% higher in cost. And that's where the big impact comes. We know that a sprained ankle or a sprained shoulder should resolve itself in 6 weeks without treatment. The same cannot be said for psychological injury. And that's the thing that we need to start paying attention to. Then if we look at what's the cause, so what is actually causing psychological injury? And if you don't think about it too clearly, you're probably going, well, traumatic events, assaults, violence. But what I found when I looked at this, and this again is Safe Work data, is about 70% of all claims do not relate to traumatic events, to post-traumatic stress disorder, to any of those things. They're just general work pressures, harassment and bullying in the workplace, and other factors around the workplace. So if we have this perception that, well, we only have to worry when something actually goes wrong, when there's a car accident, when there's an assault, we're not going to be getting to the core of the issues and making sure that we're actually taking care of our staff like we need to. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to the ever enigmatic Andrew Douglas.